Hello everyone, welcome to the newest edition of the Scale Up Thursdays. And today with me I have Sharanya Sriram. So we are going to talk about Cosmos DB, and we are going to give an overview, cover the core concepts and the developer-friendly APIs of Cosmos DB. A little bit about Sharanya before we go on. So Sharanya Sriram is a principal product manager for on the Azure engineering team for Microsoft globally distributed multi-model database as a service, Azure Cosmos DB. That is the topic of today's webinar. Prior to this, Sharanya was leading the Azure Cloud Solution Architect team, CSA team, working with partners focusing on resolving technical blockers on the Azure platform. Projects led by the partners on one-on-one and one is to few many technical engagements. She and her team also focus on helping partners and customers beyond infrastructure, application migration into automation, security, governance, cloud adoption framework, monitoring, event triggers, blockchain, and IoT developments in the APAC region, including Korea, New Zealand, and Singapore. So, with that introduction, over to you, Saranya. And also, before Saranya starts, you can also keep on asking your questions in the chat, and we will also be posting a few announcements for posting on social media on the chat as well. So keep on your questions coming, and we'll be taking the questions somewhere in the middle of the presentation as well as towards the end of the presentations. Meanwhile, I shall also be answering the questions on the chat. So keep your questions coming on the chat. With that information, over to you, Saranya. Let's start off with the presentation. Thank you for presenting.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Thanks for the very friendly introduction. Thank you so much. So I'm just going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. And hopefully, once you're able to see it, we'll get started today. Today, as I said, is going to be an overview about Microsoft's NoSQL database, born in the cloud database, globally distributed, multiple data structures data model, and it's known for its low latency, fast, OSS friendly, and developer friendly APIs. With that, I'm sharing my screen. Hopefully, once you're able to see my screen, we can get started. Right, great. So hopefully, I hope you can see the screen, and let's get started with today's session. So
yeah, we can see your screen, Saranya.
Thank you. Yeah, just as a teaser or a motivation of why we are doing this session and what's so special about Azure Cosmos DB, we went ahead and started looking at how important are today's modern application and availability of these modern applications, right? So when we look, for example, in the US landscape, which is probably the largest dollar value that we can attach to, just 3 days, Thanksgiving, Black Friday, and Cyber Monday contribute to, close to $20 billion, like 3 single days. And most of these are being transacted online. Situations such as, for example, one of the largest wholesale retailers in the US, and this was a real event. It happened, right? In Thanksgiving, this online systems were down. Availability of their applications was marred for about a couple of hours. And the loss in sales by this retailer was close to 11 million in sales. That's huge, right? And that's not just one-off event. When we go back to Twitter, we see a lot of these kinds of news saying that, hey, I apologize for technical glitches, sorry for the inconvenience, and so on and so forth. Right? So this is time and again, we see a lot of these things. So availability of applications, be it small or be it large, I guess where we are trying to get at is super critical in today's modern application world. That being said, what is the another more important piece, right? So availability or performance of application is very closely related to the latency that is permissible by end users. Well, the application can be available if its response time is, say, 2 seconds, 5 seconds versus 10 milliseconds or 15 milliseconds. Right? So there's a huge trade-off in terms of how performant the application is relating to to latency. And performance, as I said, user experience translates to dollar and customer lifetime value or loyalty. This is yet another survey that was done, wherein they kind of said that 1 second on load times, right, on websites in Amazon can actually cost $1.6 billion in sales. So this is real huge numbers we're talking about. Walmart did this study as well, and they kind of went and said that every 1 to 4 second delay in their website loads can actually lead to huge conversion of people browsing versus people actually checking out and paying, that kind of experience. So all in all, with that context of saying today's applications, being small or large, are looking for availability, looking for low latency, and just looking for snappiness, let me introduce to you guys the Azure Cosmos database for modern applications. So today, when we look at Azure Cosmos database, we like to call it as an operational data store to start with, meaning today supporting high throughput ingestion of both batch, that is bulk offline operations, or stream feeds, which are real-time streaming inputs, ingestion, and then automatic indexing around that. Global distributions with active setup if required. And then applications that can provide real-time CRUD operation and queries across multiple data structures. As I said, we have opportunities to do entity stores, key value pairs, column stores, graph database, so on and so forth, right? With APIs in .NET, Java, Node, and Python today. Right? So those are where Cosmos DB comes up today, and how we want to guarantee these basic tenets of which Cosmos DB was built. With that, for folks who probably have learned about Cosmos DB, you would have seen the slide. Let's just level set quickly so that we are all in the same page. I'd love to look at this layer cake that you see in front of you. As at the bottom of the layer is the various Azure data centers. Cosmos DB is a Ring 0 service, meaning that anytime there is network compute storage being set up in a data center, Cosmos DB is also installed as one of those Ring 0 services. The promise of Cosmos DB or the service really is to say that, hey, we can enable turnkey global distribution. Great, if you require that. We'll also help to segregate storage and throughput such that it becomes really platform as a service offering. More importantly, we guarantee you single millisecond read and write latency at the 99th percentile, P99, which probably none of the other databases today can. And then again, providing 5 well-defined consistencies. When we talk of distributed databases, right, there's always a trade-off of availability versus consistency. Probably would have been familiar with the CAP theorem, where partitioning is considered, or it's given, or it's taken. System has to be partitioned if you're looking at a globally distributed database. Then where's your trade-off? Your trade-off is either the consistency or availability. For us, availability is latency, because the system can be available, it's just that the packet's taking longer to reach. Right? So the trade-off really is between latency and consistency. So there are various consistency models. And then we also offer you comprehensive SLA across storage, across throughput, across latency, across consistency, so on and so forth. So that's your promise of where Cosmos DB has come from. And as I said, over this fundamental data store, we have data structure projections, and for the lack of a better word, we call it an API. So it's not as good as a thin API layer, but API is more like how can I actually talk to this agnostic database, Cosmos DB, through various data structures that's familiar to the customer use case, right? So there is column family, key value pairs, document store, and graph today. The actual API projections today we have is core SQL API. This is not SQL Server, but more like a SQL syntax for a JSON store. It's an entity store, it's a document store. Mongo DB, we know, so we provide you Mongo API. Similarly for column family, Cassandra API, and graph is based Gremlin API. So those are the major API stores that we have. So before we take a pause, I just wanted to hydrate what we spoke till now, just in terms of the main tenets in which Cosmos DB is built. Cosmos DB, as I said, guaranteed speed at any scale. As I said, that's probably one of the most differentiating factors of Cosmos DB, giving single millisecond read and write latencies at any scale and at P99. Right? So that's a big promise. The other piece of the caveat is providing mission critical readiness, that is SLA backed availability and enterprise level security for at the DAC and database end. We'll soon see that Cosmos DB is very application or player developer friendly. So there are a bunch of open source APIs, multiple SDKs. It's all REST enabled that we can support, and we can see how we can take charge of that as well. Finally, it is a platform as a service offering, fully managed, and at a NoSQL level, provided we are able to actually understand NoSQL world, meaning that we are able to work on queries, query optimization, and understand Cosmos DB. It has been very finely granuled to make it extremely cost effective. Right? So with these four tenets, let's look a little bit about each of the four pieces and a little more about Cosmos DB. Right? Quick reiteration, guaranteed speed at high scale. As I said, we provide you various of these guarantees. Simplified app development, as I said today, across all of these APIs, Core SQL, Mongo, Cassandra, Gremlin, and Azure Table Storage, we do provide you APIs, SDKs, etc. One point maybe to mention here, which we will cover maybe towards the end of today's session if time permits, is we're talking of Cosmos DB for most parts of today's discussion as an operational data store, OLTP store. Right? Today's world, the world divides databases as either relational and non-relational, or analytical or operational, transactional or analytical, right? More and more we see this capability of what we call as HTAP, hybrid transactional analytical processing systems, and wherein you have one integrated database that can actually work as a CRUD-based real-time transactional store, but also can be used for very complex analytical tasks. Really, how does that happen? By physics, it cannot happen, right? Because one needs some sort of a row format storage, while other probably needs to be property-based or columnar storage. In the big data world, for the analytic workload, people store as Apache Parquet formats, right? Row stores are being stored in multiple entity row store formats. So Cosmos DB today, we do have an analytical store co-located with our row store. So for end users, it provides a complete hybrid transactional analytical processing system setup, wherein the data ingestion is coming to the CRUD store or your operational store, instantaneously, automatically replicated into your analytical store. Today, the lag is about 30 seconds. We're trying to bring it down to 5 seconds. But then as an endpoint, this is one unit. And we'll talk a little bit about how various other compute systems can use this data storage to go ahead and do big data compute, crunching, etc. We spoke about mission critical, Cosmos DB, ability of Cosmos DB to provide zero downtime with zero RPO as well. Also, another interesting piece that not many databases out there have is for situations like today you're having a startup and you're catering to one particular segment, one particular market. As the startup grows or scales, you probably want to go from 1% of customers, multiply 100x, right? Like if your spike is very high and you don't want to rewrite or ensure that your database system is clear and strong, those are situations where Cosmos DB is coming handy as well. Ability to bring your data close to users as opposed to users close to data. What I mean by that is ability to geo-distribute and instantaneously with a single click to have a turnkey global replication of your database, and then ability to provide multi-master write capability over this data store. All of these are just, these are huge distributed database, interesting concepts if you want, if you may, but just the fact that you are able to do that with one click and it seamlessly happens at the backend, the simplicity is probably the power for us to appreciate here in Cosmos Database. So with this, let me just pause. Vinayak, do we have any questions or do we need to revisit any specific things right now?
We don't have any questions.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe take questions later.
Sure. If we do have questions, yeah, feel free to put it on the chat. We'll address them immediately. Otherwise, we will park it and we'll ensure that all of your questions are addressed. Right. So that was one part that I wanted to mention. The other thing about Cosmos Database is consistency. So let's take a mild change of mode and let's go back and take a look at Cosmos DB's portal on the Azure Cloud Portal. Right? If you can see my screens here, this is the Azure portal, and I'm opened up an Azure Cosmos DB account, which I've obviously created ahead of time, right? And at the time of creating an Azure Cosmos DB account, probably asks you what data structure you want to use or what API you want to use. Probably have to make that decision in the beginning to say, I want to use Mongo, I want to use SQL API, Cassandra, so on and so forth. But once you've had that going, this Data Explorer tabs kind of shows you the various databases along with the collections, which is essentially the entity stores within each of those databases. Let me click on replicate data globally because I wanted to kind of just show you this. And I was talking to you about turnkey global replication as well. So today, for example, this database is provisioned somewhere in East US, which is Hong Kong, and I have another region which is Korea, right? So I've tried to set this up here. Actually going ahead and adding a region is as good as, hey, let me go and add Australia East, let me go ahead and add UAE North, and then I just have to go and save. Then instantly my data is going to be replicated on all of these locations and it's going to be available. This is where I just go ahead and enable multi-region writes. Then all these regions will accept writes, simultaneous writes, and then they will automatically be conflict resolved and then synchronized across the region. Of course, the situations, we use the conflict resolution using the last writer wins algorithm based on our OCC and ETACs. However, if you want to implement a custom conflict resolution, that is also possible, right? So this is as simple and straightforward to go ahead and set up or look at globally replicate. The other piece that we were just heading to is talking about consistency. Cosmos DB provides 5 consistencies, well-defined consistencies. The default one that you see here is session state consistency. Session state consistency kind of says that, hey, I provide you monotonic reads and monotonic writes, meaning that every session user will ensure that whatever they write, they are going to read them in exactly the right order without any loss of data. So that incidentally about 70% of our customers are using session state today. However, there is also other consistencies, right? So on one end of the spectrum is eventual consistency. In globally distributed systems, they say eventually consistent systems are ones that will not be instantaneously consistent, which means you're making a write, in this case, the green region here in the US, by laws of physics, the packet size has to travel from US here. So it's going to have some latency to go and reach the other data center, which is your Hong Kong right here. It's going to take a while to go ahead and reach that, right? Eventually, both these databases will be consistent and they'll be same, but any point in time, they need not be exactly consistent. Situations such as, I don't know, if you're writing a blog and you're writing blog comments, you're totally okay if some comments are coming up later than the others. You really are not. It's not like a checkout or a food cart, something like that, right? So there are a lot of use cases for eventual consistencies which are real today. Similarly, on the other end of spectrum, there is strong consistency. By strong, we means that, hey, the system has to get an ACK, acknowledgement back from all the other regions that whatever data has been updated or written before the ACK goes back to the end customer. Right? So your system availability is hampered. Your application is kind of waiting for the transaction to complete. And in a way, you'll get the response back only if it's strongly committed in all the regions. So that's and this is all across regions. This whole concept of consistency is purely across regions. Within one region, Cosmos DB automatically offers 4 replicas, and that's our internal thing. That's not required by the customers, but we have a quorum, 3-strong quorum commit before returning back a response to the user. So that is within a single region. Across regions is what we say. Interest of time, I'm just going to kind of say that there is something called bounded staleness, which is between strong and session. Bounded staleness says that I'm closer to a strong consistency, but hey, if you are okay for a mild window of staleness of data, that window could be number of seconds, you can say. I can say that I want 5 seconds of staleness or 5 minutes of staleness, or the number of operations, stale operations or mutations that you're agreeing. So in this case, whichever is a lower, that amount of data can be stale. But beyond that, your system will be strongly consistent. Consistent prefix, on the other hand, kind of says that you will not read out of order writes. That will not be read. So this is a beautiful animation across each of these to show, for example, if this was the note that was played in East US, how will that be received in the other read regions? For example, when I just look at East US and the reads and writes here, for example, you can see that certain things can be mistaken or certain things can be omitted. But once an item has been read, out of order reads will not happen. So in this case, once black has been read, you will not then get any of the colors before the black, right? So just in a way to say that consistent prefix is also one of the consistencies available. So these are some of the out-of-the-box capabilities in Cosmos DB, the way that makes it special as we talk today. Every item in the SQL API is automatically indexed unless you go ahead and tell Cosmos DB to not index it. For Mongo, we've slightly made a change recently because obviously we have to follow the Mongo Wire protocol, which doesn't index by default. So obviously we are not allowed to index by default as well. But that being said, our indexing itself is it's an automatic synchronous indexing that we talk about, and it's for highly write optimized database engine. So the index is going to work across various kinds of data models as well. Right. So what we just saw now, we saw Cosmos DB for operational database with all the things that I spoke about. We also saw it's globally distributed. We said there are multiple models of data structures. We spoke about multi-master capability here, and we spoke about low latency, developer-friendly API, indexing, it's a ring zero service, etc. One thing that we didn't quite talk to, and we'll see during demos, is Cosmos DB also allows auto scale, wherein you can automatically scale up or scale down your throughput requirements in Cosmos database, and we'll come to it. All right, so really quickly, keeping this more as a technical overview session, but also to kind of feel grounded, there are reasons why customers use Cosmos DB. There are reasons such as latency requirements, reasons such as mission critical downtime requirements, for consistency requirements, for global scale up as and when required, and also hybrid transactional analytical processing systems. That is a unique differentiation on Cosmos DB as well. So aligned to that, there are multiple use cases. Some use cases starting a lot of online e-commerce retail use cases in Cosmos DB today. For example, we know Walmart ran its holiday season on Cosmos DB. A lot of e-commerce sites, Starbucks, Domino's Pizzas is on Cosmos database. Azure portal that we just saw now is hosted on Cosmos database. The Teams on which we are chatting right now is powered by Cosmos database. So you kind of see that there is a lot of large applications as well. Also in the smaller startup systems, right? We see a lot of startups where they want to go platform as a service. A lot of plumbing works that's already taken care of by the system, and ability to have that distributed scale out, NoSQL data store, if you may, find value in Cosmos database. Few customers that we have worked with and we are working with today, just to kind of give you an outset. And with that, let's go and do a little bit of demo. I'll pause here just to check with on any questions that we might have at this point. Feel free to put them in. It's your time. I hope this is useful for you.
Hi, sir. There aren't questions now, so we can proceed. We can questions at the end of the webinar.
Sure. All right. Okay. So with that, what I want to kind of show you is how does Cosmos, how can you look, feel, touch, how does Cosmos DB really work, right? So let's close the presentation. Let me go back to the Cosmos DB portal here. I'm going to the Data Explorer, and as it's opening up and setting it up, I wanted to call out an application that we've got here. This application, all it does is, it's a .NET app. I've used the .NET SDK v3 version 3. It's able to connect to Cosmos DB endpoint, and it does a bunch of ingestions into our data store. So if you kind of say that it's inserting bulk documents, 71 documents, 32 documents, 58 documents, and it's saying there is some amount of charge for inserting this. So something that we will spend time in the next couple of minutes to understand what is this RU per second mean. But at this point, kind of take to the fact that this is a system that's inserting documents into Cosmos database. Can we see that it's actually inserting in what is being inserted upon? If I go to my Cosmos DB Explorer, and if I just kind of show you guys where I've set this up here, a database called demo, and the container or the collection name benchmark. So let's go open up demo, and let's open up benchmark. And then we see a bunch of things here, right? So we can go and take a look at the items, which are actually each of the items which are coming through. So it's a simple JSON file, has an ID, partition key, some amount, and then a bunch of these data. Now this is ever increasing, or there is some amount of activity required in this system, right? There is something called Azure Metrics. And once I open up the Azure Metrics, I can go ahead and choose a particular database, in our case, a container, and kind of say that, hey, there's an average throughput of 504, and then there is this amount of data size, and there's an index size on my data store. Now I'm trying to say all of this because the way Cosmos DB prices or actually executes is on two big factors. One is the storage component, the storage size. The other is what we call as the throughput, or which is the number of transactions per second, or the query workload that we can work through, right? So those are the two big parameters that we want to. And this throughput is measured by a currency based on CPU IOPS memory called RU, or request units per second. Now, what I'm trying to show you is there's something called a provisioned RU. For example, when we go back to the Data Explorer, and then we are able to open up Cosmos DB collection, and then open up scale and setting operations, we will notice that there are two options to set this throughput or RU. Now you might ask me, what does an RU mean and how do I measure that? We'll come to that. But just at this point, assume that if you want to use number of transactions per second, you would use request units. And in the request units, I have this option to say I can use manual or I could use auto scale. And when I use auto scale, I set up my maximum auto scale limit, means that it can automatically scale from 400 RUs all the way to 4000 based on usage. And that is what I'm trying to show right here, saying that I'm creating some usage, and this usage is having basically just a couple of RUs. As we said, the 774 RUs, there's 400 RUs, so there's a RU variation. And given that RU variation is there, and I've set 4000 RUs, I should be able to go ahead and in this case take a look at, for example, our Azure monitors to see how much RU I have set here, set around 400K, but what am I actually using around this time, right? So this is more like an auto scale capability to kind of say that minimum is 400 RUs, right? So that's going to be minimum. But then based on actual number of requests that you see or usage, like here you see that there is, the chart has been refreshed further to kind of say that, hey, the highest is 4000, but you're being charged in this case less than, I don't know, about 700, 600, because at that instant, that's probably what you are using. So couple of ways to work with Cosmos DB, metrics, diagnostics being a very crucial factor for us to see how to work with Cosmos database. There are a lot of other metrics charts you can go through. We can say what's your, in this case, you could say what's your total requests that are coming. And then in this, I could go and say, can I add a split these total requests based on operation type, for example, then kind of it tells me how many are creates versus how many are reads. Clearly, if you kind of look at this, this is going to be a lot more creates because I'm just adding and inserting and I'm not really reading from this collection. So it's clearly calling this out. This is what I did. And just a couple of hours before we started this webinar, I started ingesting. So we kind of got some data sample set to work or take a look at. Okay, so that's a quick rundown just to kind of show you how we can work with Cosmos database and how you can see these charts, monitors, and various other tools. Now let's go back and look at certain other very interesting concepts of how Cosmos DB internals now work. While I'm transferring the screen, if there are questions, feel free to call out or shout out so that way we kind of know.
There are questions now, but I have a few questions from my interactions with startup, which maybe I can ask towards the end of the presentation based on the use cases that the startups have been using. So these are the questions I've received from the startups in my interaction. So I'll probably use them at the end.
Sure. All right. So now we are taking a step back to understand Cosmos database internals because it's extremely crucial to understand how Cosmos DB works, and there is a bit of learning curve in Cosmos database, meaning that we need to understand how the system works internally so we can leverage it effectively and cost efficiently as well. So as we said, Azure regions have multiple data centers. Each data centers has various stamps, and they have something called fault domain and upgrade domains. Fault domains are domains of single point of failure. And within fault domains, you have cluster. These clusters are typically in our end, it's called service fabric clusters, wherein they load balance multiple virtual machine nodes that can be set up. And across these cluster or federation of service fabrics, each node is like a virtual machine, is a machine. That machine, what we like to call it as a replica. Right? So that node or the single replica, in which case, has various the core database engine, of course, and then has some governance, transport, and admission control factors. Now, the database engine of this replica is the crucial part, because as you see, it has the query processor, has the main resource manager. This resource manager is what spits the RU, or request units per second, to say, hey, at the database engine level, doing a particular operation, how much requests per second does it consume? And then an aggregate of that request units per second is what is translated upwards as part of the allocated or provisioned RU. It's also index manager, storage engine, and log manager. Right? So that's your Cosmos DB engine. That being said, next is oops. Sorry, just give me 1 second, please. I might need to just quickly unshare and reshare my screen. And I'm just going to start. I hope you can still see me and hear me. Let me reshare and see if we are able to work through that.
Yeah, yes, Saranya, we can see you and hear you well. Meanwhile, if you have any questions, please post them in the chat. As I've been answering questions like, for example, can Cosmos DB be used for relational data as well? Yes, we do support relational data as well, and I think Saranya will also be answering this question going forward.
So the main piece, main piece about this answering to this question is the fact that Cosmos DB is a NoSQL store. So when we call as a NoSQL store, we can't say that it is schema-less. It is schema agnostic, so to speak. So it is not a relational store. However, we can write SQL-like statements. We can write stored procedures, and we can provide some atomicity and durability to your queries. So that part is there. But Cosmos DB is clearly a NoSQL store. So whenever we want to use relational data store in Cosmos DB, you definitely want to first denormalize it and convert from relational store to a non-relational store to be able to access Cosmos database. So the way it is there behind the scenes really is, as I said, everything is called a container. A container is a collection or a table or a container, all same words that we just saw on the portal. Now each container is made up of multiple physical partitions, what we call as resource partitions, based on, because it's a scale out data, it has the data is coming to a petabyte, terabyte, there will be multiple physical partitions, and each partition set or a resource partition is made up of 4 replicas or 4 nodes or 4 virtual, basically say container in this form of Docker containers, right? So that's different from this containers, just so that we are clear when we talk about terminologies. So yeah, so now just for your understanding, if there is a replica, let's go and look at this, maybe that will be more clear. So assume that you have your data, which is made up of so many replica sets, which means each replica set can take about 50 GB of storage. So in this case, it's about 350 GB, and that's why you need so many physical partitions. And assume we have geo-replicated that to 3 regions. So you see there are 3 regions. Now this across these regions, for example, what we call is there's this global distribution of your data which goes across these regions and they are mapped to one another, right? So that's really how I will see these 3. For example, if there are 3 regions, each replica set will talk to its counterpart in the other region so that, you know, they are all completely in sync, and based on the consistency, whether it's eventual versus strong versus session, they'll ensure that the data integrity is maintained, right? So now that is done. The next piece that we want to understand as we go along here is the concept of request units. We did keep saying, what is this request units, right? So as I said, it's a currency or a rate card which abstracts CPU memory IOPS that is utilized by the Cosmos DB database engine to perform your queries or your transactions, right? So typically 1 request units is about 1 kilobyte of data that is being read. And there is a request unit or an RU calculator that we can use to kind of evaluate how much RU will be calculated per query, for example, right? Or even when we do or on the portal, or we want to look at you know, some sort of a way do POCs or some queries, etc. Like this query, if I'm just executing a particular query, select star from the current table and it's spitting this, there's something called query stats. When I look at the query stats here, it's going to tell me this particular query took 8 RU. And then it kind of showed so many results and what's the document size, how many document counts, and certain other details, right? How much time it took to execute, so on and so forth. But request charge, the best way to find the request charge is actually just request it. Or the other way to kind of look at the request charge is there is a calculator or a sample that we have stood up where you can just go ahead and put in your, there are multiple ways to do it. You can try to put in your sample data set and your query and it'll tell you how much RU that query can take. Or in a very simplistic way, there is a capacity calculator that we can use, cosmos.azure.com/capacity calculator. But if you really don't know much about your JSON that you're holding and things like that, you can go ahead and kind of say that if you have a sample JSON, you can upload that, great. But then if you don't, you can just say that my each document size is about 1 kilobyte and I'm having 100 reads per second, like you just how many creates, reads, updates, transactions per second you're looking at, and then we can say how much RU will this take, right? So essentially this will probably be the RU charge, for example, without any other, it's like the out-of-the-box pricing without any other discounts per se. Right. So, so what do we do? There are 2 or 3 ways to use Cosmos DB in terms of billing. One is we can go ahead and say provisioned RU. That's what this picture says, wherein you'll go and say I need 400 RUs per second, and every second your bucket will have 400 RUs, irrespective of use it or don't use it. If you use it and you need more, there will be throttling that will happen, right? the maximum RU that you set, there'll be throttling that will happen. Whereas if you're not using the RU that you've set, whatever is lost in that second is lost. Right? So it's RU per second. The other way that the demo you just now saw was auto scale. When I say auto scale, essentially what we are trying to do here is we are saying that I'm setting RU as 4000 RUs, but I'm not using 4000. I'm probably using at the maximum here is about 2K, 2000 RUs, and I'll be charged 2000 here, but then at a later point, I'll probably be charged only 400 or 500 RUs based on my usage. Right? So that's your second thing. The third way in Cosmos DB pricing is something called serverless pricing mode, wherein it's purely not based on, it's just based on total RU, not RU per second, and something like 25 cents for about 250 million RUs as a total RU. So the documentation in serverless, and you can use it. Today, serverless supports mostly dev test workloads up to 50 GB of storage that we've just removed up, so it can be more than that. And then we've also removing the cap of that 5000 RU was a maximum cap limit, which is also being removed. So serverless is something that people find valuable. The other thing is Cosmos DB is giving the first 400 RUs per second free and 5 GB of data free forever. So if you're trying out workloads and you want to see how it works and you're setting up to 400 RUs per second, which I guess starting build in the next 2-3 months, we're increasing it to about 1000 RUs. So this amount will be part of the free tier. Per Azure subscription, you can have one free tier Cosmos DB account. Right? Also, this TTL expiration is a very interesting concept in Cosmos DB. You can set item level TTLs in Cosmos database. And if you set item level TTLs, you don't need to do a delete operation. It will just be TTL'd out based on your need. Okay, so now how does costing really work, right? So there are two cost components in Cosmos DB. One cost component is called the storage and the other is called RU or the throughput, right? So when I talk about storage cost, it's essentially, it's actually very minimal, similar to blob storage, about 25 cents per GB. So in this case, if you're having 100 GB, you'll be paying some $25 for storage. Throughput is what is interesting. Throughput cost is made up of the RUs per second, so you probably need to calculate how much RUs. So assuming you're having a create operation or insert operation, and you're having 100 insert operations, each operation consuming 5 RUs, total of 500 RUs will be needed for creates. If the number of reads is 400 reads per second and per read is 1 RU, then you will need total of 400 RUs. So total RU across inserts and reads are about 900 RUs per second. So cost of RUs, we build up 100 RU per second units we build, which is $6 for 100 RUs. For 900 RUs, it will be about $59. So in this case, the final bill will be storage bill plus throughput bill, which is $79. And this is what you will see in the calculator. This is what you will see here as well. Like there will be a storage bill and there will be a throughput bill, and then there will be the total bill. I'm just going to keep going. If there are questions, then let me know.
In fact, there are a few questions. So
sure, I think it's a good time to pause. Yeah, because now after which we can now go into other specifics about partitioning. Yes.
Sure. Okay. So there's a bunch of questions. I think for the first question I already asked, but if you want to add anything to it, so I'll read it again. Is Cosmos DB only add for NoSQL, or can it be used for relational data as well?
It is a NoSQL data store. That's period. We have capabilities of relational data store things such as I said, atomicity and durability, stored procedure support, etc. But essentially, it is Microsoft's NoSQL store. If you want relational store, Of course, there is SQL Server from Microsoft, right? Otherwise, there is MySQL, MariaDB, Postgres. So there are relational stores which go by normalized row tuples and columns, etc. Cosmos DB is a NoSQL store.
Sharan, you can stop sharing your screen for a bit. Because it's mirroring the video. Yeah. So this question was by Kinar Shah. The next question is by Samir Sahu. So she has a few questions on Cosmos DB. So the first question he asked is Cosmos DB completely API based, or can it be installed separately like other DBs? We have data in an RDBMS, and can that be migrated into Cosmos DB?
Yeah, so Cosmos DB is it is born in the cloud solution. So the database will reside in cloud. There is a Cosmos DB emulator, which is more like you can install it and try and test it, but it's more to emulate what you're going to store in the cloud. So yes, it is a born in the cloud emulator. It's not something that we can set up an on-premise node and then use the database. API, as I said, is a very interesting terminology we use. We use the term API because all the data inherently in Cosmos DB today is stored in our backend data store in a format what we call as atom record sequence format. It's a patented paper. I'll just put the link in there in a bit, but that's where the actual data is stored. But then you are now accessing the data using either document store or Mongo or SQL or Cassandra or Graph. Since you're using it in different data structures, we are using the term APIs to the way we are using that data. But that's not the fact that it's a thin client layer where you're just using it as it's a core database, but this database sits on Azure only. That is the bottom line. Yes. And what's your second question for that? Can I use relational too? Yeah. So for that piece, yes, we have migrated a lot of relational data to Cosmos DB as well. There are some interesting articles in our documentation, which I'm going to put in there for you to go and take a look at. But essentially, it's not a one-click or a wizard process, right? The fundamental difference between relational and NoSQL is relational data store. You start with your database, you come up with a database model and schema, and then you have an ORM, right? Object resource mapping. And then you kind of build your classes and your objects to map to the schema, and then you perform operations and you have your foreign key and primary key constraints to be able to retrieve your data. So that's your traditional way. In NoSQL way, you first start reverse. You start with what does the application want to do? So if this is a browsing cart application, this is an online, library management system, or some sort of an online application. What are the core features of the applications? From these features, what are the main kinds of screens that you want? What queries will be coming from these screens? So based on that, how should my data store looks like? So you will start with queries. And so understanding your top queries, and if they kind of say that 80% of your application is run by 20% of queries, right? What is that top 20% of your queries in your application? Based on that, the schema or the JSON feed is created, but then that feed is very flexible because the applications can tweak it, or you can add another property. If it's an online catalog and today you say that I have a new product which doesn't have this parameter. Now this new product, like the vaccine is coming, we never used to think of temperatures when we have an online product catalog. Now there's vaccine in the product catalog, I need to have temperature. The backend schema did not have that in the model. It's very easy to bring in new constructs, right? So that's the benefit. But there is this modeling work that is required for you to take a look at.
Cool. I think the next question is also from Samir Sahu. A couple more questions. The first one is regarding the usage of Cosmos DB. So he asks, MySQL returns a result set, but as Cosmos returns data in a JSON format, how are you going to implement in your existing web application? And the second question you partly answered as well, which was what would be the estimated effort if migration of existing data from MySQL RDMS to Cosmos DB?
Yeah, so for that, I'm just pasting in a couple of links, right? So how do you model and partition, for example, relational data model? What could be the access patterns? How do you think about modeling and partitioning data? So there are some interesting how-to guides in our documentation tools. So I'm just going to paste a couple of these factors right here. So that's going to be beneficial here. So there is this migrate relational database example scenario that I've just pasted here on the IM chat. Hopefully you can get the IM, or if you can, Vinayak, if you can just paste these links onto the chat, that will be great.
I'm pasting these links in the chat.
So what these kinds of walkthrough is primarily to your questions. As I said, right, that, today we cannot or we do not have a wizard or a tool that will migrate from MySQL to Cosmos database. We have to go based on your application requirement and what you want to do. Now, what is very interesting is your question whether we need to embed versus reference. That's the fundamental question. In relational world, of course, you have joins. That's your power weapon, right? When you come to NoSQL world, the first question that database engineers ask is, where are my joins? They ask, where are my joins? Oh my God, where are my joins? So in NoSQL data stores, you do not have joins. So is it a bad thing? Is that something that, but you know that today's industry trends, modern applications, many customers are going through a NoSQL store. How is it working? Why is it working without joins, right? So when you start thinking about that, it becomes a very fundamental question whether you want to embed data or do you want to reference the data. There are some rules and tools that we think about when we think of embedding versus referencing based on the data co-locality, the query, whether the queries will want this data or not, so on and so forth. And that's also another very good article and good labs that we have set up for that front. And I'm going to share that link as well as part of our
cool. I think the questions are coming thick and fast now. So,
yes. So maybe what we can do is given, please do keep asking the questions. I love it. What we can do is, while I'm just IMing some more data points for folks to go look at if you want to send.
Sure.
So one thing that we can do questions. I think that will be helpful for everyone. I'll probably talk about 5 minutes just on 2-3 topics, and there is a lot more to chat, but then we'll dedicate mainly on questions because we want to address the question. Is it fair?
Sure, sounds good.
Yeah, because one thing that we saw till now is really an overview of Cosmos DB. What I want to kind of highlight right now, maybe I can just talk through it and then we can, if you want, I can share. But essentially what I'm trying to say is there are two concepts in Cosmos DB that we need to get it very clear and strong. Any NoSQL database, when we talk, we need to understand that there is something called partitioning and there is data modeling. These are the two exercises that any of us will have. It's not rocket science, by the way, but there needs to be due diligence to understand what is my partitioning strategy today and as we grow longer, etc. In Cosmos DB, there are two partitions. One we call as logical partition, one we call as physical partition. Physical partition is a no-brainer. You need to add 50 GBs of machines, and as I told you, those are my backend database servers, and that's my physical partition. End user doesn't care about physical partition because we split, we manage, we maintain. End users care about logical partition. What's a logical partition? Logical partition is what you give as your partition ID or partition key when you create your Cosmos DB account. All data in one logical partition will be co-located exactly in the same physical store. One physical partition can have more than one logical partition. A logical partition cannot span across more than one physical partition. I'm saying a lot of things at the same time here, right? But net of this is what I want to do before Q&A is the most important thing that we want to think about is very counterintuitive. Today on-prem, if you're setting up a system, you will want to set as minimum number of partitions as possible, and as and when you require, you'll add extra partitions. That's your physical partition mindset. In Cosmos DB, we do not need to worry about cardinality of the partition key. Like it can be many. Don't be too afraid to have too many partition keys, because all these partition keys are logical partition keys, and multiple logical partition keys will stay within one physical partition. Right. What is important is if your query that you write, typically, like if you write select star from C where C dot ID equal to Saranya, and if the partition key is Saranya, then you know that all records which relate to Saranya will be co-located in the same physical partition, which means that your query will go and hit only one physical partition. That means it's a single partition query. You're not having a cross partition fan out query. Any cross partition fan out queries will be more expensive than a single partition query. So typically where there is a where clause, some things like that, we can go ahead and decide and see how we want to partition it. Because this webinar is really short, I kind of wanted to call out the fact that there is this one-stop shop called gotcosmos.com. So in gotcosmos.com, if we go down, there is something called workshops, and you can go ahead. And in this workshop, there are scenario-based labs. There are multiple workshops. But what I'd love to call out is this Azure Cosmos DB workshop, wherein we have multiple slides and also hands-on lab in Java and .NET to go ahead to multiple concepts that we spoke. While it could be very simple to use Cosmos DB, later if we do not understand how partitioning is working or how systems are load balanced, you will be surprised because you're using Cosmos DB inefficiently. Many of about 90% of the issues in Cosmos DB that we have today relating to either be it very cost expensive or things like that is or throttled, it's hit the provision limits, is mainly because of folks not using Cosmos DB or leaving a lot on the table unused. They're provisioning something and not using it enough, not choosing the right partition key, not understanding how systems are load balanced, so on and so forth. So as a takeaway, as we speak here, there is this thing called data modeling, and there's something on partitioning. This data modeling is going to talk specifically about, as I said, how do I convert a relational to a non-relational component, and then I will leave it to you guys to go and look at it. Right? What are the two extremes? When do I want to normalize everything, or do I want to embed everything? Which is my best option to do what, right? So those are those constraints. Similarly, there is this partitioning session as well, and I would recommend you to go and take a look at that too. So with that, where I want to now lean over to have time and space for questions is actually just talking about one last thing on Cosmos DB here. I started off saying Cosmos DB is an operational data store, but we'd also like to call out that we now have analytical store co-located by it so that we can run analytical workloads together in Cosmos DB. So what are the benefits of running HTAP in Cosmos DB? And today we deeply integrate with the Synapse analytical store. For those of you who are not familiar with Synapse, you could look at it as Synapse is more an analytical compute workspace like Databricks, Microsoft's offering, for example. So given that Cosmos DB has an analytical store co-located, you want to bring some computes that can work on this analytical store. So how does this look like? So this is our Cosmos DB as a single container. All our operational data is coming into this row store. We are automatically syncing it to the analytical store. Analytical store is not charged based on RU for queries or any of those. There is no cost involved except the storage in the columnar store, right? So once you have this sync up, we have something called the Azure Synapse Link that will provide a Spark-based connector. today we have two options. One is you can use Apache Spark to connect to the analytical store, or you could use SQL serverless or SQL on demand, SQL based queries to talk to the analytical store. That's probably it. And so one, you can do machine learning, big analytics, or you can build Power BI dashboards. And this is under the space of what brand we call as Synapse Analytics Workspace. So wanted to definitely call that this is a huge use case and something that we are working through. Outside of that, also wanted to kind of call out that today, at least in this session, we didn't speak too much about Mongo or Cassandra. These are also first-class citizens in Cosmos DB. With Mongo today, we support 3.6 via protocol header, but we go support based on features and not based on the version header. For example, we have change streams, which is info.0, but that's available today in Cosmos database, right? So so on and so forth. Point I'm trying to make there is as an overview session, the focus was to kind of share with you that there are developer APIs. It is very developer friendly, and then Cosmos DB works across operational and analytical store. Finally, we OSS friendly in terms of Apache Cassandra, also other third-party APIs such as Mongo as first-class citizens. These are going to be accessible to developers and to as REST APIs. You could use the same Mongo tools and shells to work on it, so on and so forth. So those were the main pieces that I kind of wanted to touch upon. If we do have time, we can talk more. But at this point, let's kind of pause and answer all your questions. I did hear that we had a lot of questions, right? So let's go and answer the questions now.
Yeah, so we have about another 20 minutes or so. Let me just go to the questions. So Shahidullah Al Mahmood asks, what are the performance differences between SQL Server and Cosmos DB? And I mean, let's answer that question and then I'll move on to the next question. Yeah.
Sure. So you're asking between apples and orange, like what's the taste difference between apple and orange? See, the difference is there are two database implementation philosophies, NoSQL versus SQL. The promise of NoSQL is inherently we are able, or at least Cosmos DB, the patented database, is providing you extremely low latency, single millisecond read-write latency. Other databases in market, relational or non-relational, very hard to beat it, right? The speed of light across the world, for example, is about 340, 345 milliseconds, right? But if we are giving you single millisecond read and write latency, what is the magic? Like, how is it? How are we cheating physics, right? So that is, I would say, one way to look at benchmark. Two is we are giving it at P99 level. So we do not have SQL Server versus Cosmos DB benchmark. I don't think we'll ever do that. But you cannot get single millisecond read or late latency across any other databases. Yes, that we are pretty confident about.
Okay, I think Samir Sahu has asked this question. What would be the estimated effort if migration of existing data from MySQL RDMS to Cosmos DB is taken up? And what would be, again, the follow-up question is, what would be the estimated effort if you plan to replace RDMS with Cosmos DB in the web application built on Spring Boot?
Yeah, so we support Spring Boot framework, right? Estimated, it's very hard to say so many man hours, few hours, etc. But then when we look at estimated effort, I would look at it in three phases. One is pre-migration is one phase. And what does pre-migration entail? Pre-migration phase entails the fact that, hey, do I understand Cosmos DB? There's a learning component to understand Cosmos DB. Have I chosen the right partition key? Do I know what my queries are going to look like? And do I know how these queries are being optimized? So that is the four components in the pre-migrations. And actually, to be honest, we have certain third-party visualization from our partners, like Accolade is one partner, Stream, STIIRM is another partner, who go ahead and build these tools that can actually help us to do, say, Oracle to Cosmos DB migration, or Mongo, or any relational MySQL to Cosmos DB migration, etc. So, so there is this pre-migration step. The next step is actual migration step. So in the actual migration step, you have, do you want, how much is your feasible downtime that you want? Do you want to do an online migration or do you want to do an offline migration? So those will be certain constraints that we'll have to think about in terms of effort. Again, if you want to do online migration, do you want to use tools like Azure Data Factory provides certain migration capabilities for smaller data sets, and there are also other migration tools like Cerebrata, Scovoy, so on and so forth, right? Various other ETL tools. Now the question is, during this migration, in fact, many of our customers who migrated, say, from Oracle to Cosmos DB, they would have their own bulk insert executor. Today, Cosmos DB's .NET and Java API comes with bulk executor ingrained inbuilt. So you can set up compute to do this. Now, this is limited by the compute infrastructure you set up, like Kubernetes cluster, or just a machine which will actually take the data from the source and push it to the sink. So then your migration speed is delimited by that, and that's the effort for you to write this piece of code, right, that you do. So the actual second component is during migration. The third component is really post-migration. Post-migration in terms of have I set the right metrics? This is all pretty straightforward. There are logs, there are metrics. You can go and capture these, but are you actually looking at the right metrics? Are you getting the right data, telemetry that you want? So those will be the post-migration, and also the pricing and the cost. Is it in line with what your estimations are? Are you optimized enough? So these three are the 3 steps of migration. I cannot tell you it will take 1 man-hour, 2 man-hour, because we don't know what is your application. If it's a straightforward mean stack, there are sessions where people have migrated in 20 minutes, 30 minutes. But Walmart, for example, migrated huge Cassandra clusters. Starbucks migrated a lot of Mongo clusters. Costco, for example, also migrated a bunch. And I hope all of this is within our context, right? These are not published case studies, but we are able to reference these case studies because we actually worked with these guys. But given that we did all of these to those guys, of course, it takes time. For a large retailer, the shortest time we did relational to non-relational migration, this is for a large, I'm talking about 25 terabytes, right, is 3 months. But that was very aggressive. Realistically, it can take larger your existing applications are, larger the complexity of existing application, more downstream other apps and upstream connection points you have to your application, harder it is to do that. Finally, your application code, right? Your code will have to change. SQL connection strings won't work. Your return will be a deserialized JSON format. Of course, there are ORM, our entity framework from .NET supports, Spring Boot supports, for example. So you can reuse, a lot of reusability is there. But the fact that to reap long-term benefits and assuming that you prefer non-relational NoSQL as your way long-term, that will be a conscious choice for you to do this.
Yeah, the application model, data model needs to change, right? The way you query, the way you store data, the way you get the result set. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, and I think one of the key takeaways also is like the partitioning is like a key strategy that you need to think about a lot when you're doing the migration. Yeah. Now, this is a question by Bill Reynolds, but I also get this question a lot when I talk to startups because they're using MongoDB or Cassandra and they're moving on to Cosmos DB. So he asks, how does the initial database flavor affect your options later on? Can I choose MongoDB first and still use Gremlin and Cassandra later before I migrate?
So today consciously we made a decision that we are not opening the floodgates for interoperability of APIs. Mainly because if you're implementing our own native API, like SQL API is our entity store, Gremlin is our native integration. That interoperability is the defaults and our interoperability most straightforward. If we are catching up or if you're following a third party, Mongo's Wire protocol, and tomorrow Mongo changes their Wire protocol to something else, then there is going to be a gap, or this data is going to be broken, the pipeline is going to be broken. So there is a conscious thing that, hey, at the back end, although they are being stored in the data store, we will be one of the first choices you will do when you create a Cosmos DB account is to say which data model you want to choose. Do you want to use it as Cassandra or Mongo or SQL or Gremlin? Once you do that, you stick to it.
Cool. Kinnarsha asked this question, can you please explain throttling that happens when I exceed my max provisioned RAUs? And how will it affect the user experience in that case?
Yeah, so it's a great question. You see, as I said, you can set some RUs, right? If you set auto scale, the highest level of auto scale will be your top threshold. If you set provisioned, then your provisioned is it's going to be charged at the provision rate, and that's going to be your top RU. Now, if your request you're getting is going beyond the RUs that you have provisioned or you've set as your auto scale, what is going to happen is you will see a 429 in your SQL API exception. In Mongo, it's 16500, right? That's your error code, is what will be thrown to say that, hey, there is a error. Now, there are two things that happen at the behind the scene. Before this 429 comes back as a response to the client, in the SQL API, we have about 9 retries, maximum of about 30 minutes, that the system will retry before throwing the error. And once the error is thrown, it's the user's responsibility or the client's responsibility to retry that request. On the Mongo side, we have server-side retries enabled for up to 60 seconds. So up to 1 minute, there will be retries which will be enabled automatically. But beyond that, once you have 16500 error code that's thrown, we'll have to go ahead and implement the retry. Yes.
Cool. I think this is the last question, and also doing a time check, we have about 10 to 12 minutes more. So probably this is going to be the last question, unless any more questions come in. So Johan Tagel asks, I'm working on a Cosmos Synapse links. Objective is to make dashboard in Power BI. Is creating views the correct thing to do?
Creating views is the correct thing to do. Yeah, I would say so. When you say creating view, are you creating view on SQL OD on demand? If you're doing that, yeah, sure. I would say that could be one way to look at it. The other way to look at it will be you're just querying that data, right? Or also having that query stored on the Power BI side, assuming the reports are on Power BI. Power BI also has views that you can create to store. That I think would be a better idea than duplicating that data on the SQL on demand. And then Power BI, if the data is changed, there's a refresh that can happen. We are also working with a Power BI direct refresh, right? Like Power BI has a capability where if the source item is refreshed, then there is this direct query on Power BI. That will come, I guess, in the next 2-3 months. Once that comes, then I guess that will be the most ideal situation. But as of now, depending on what you want, setting views in Power BI is ideal.
Okay, I think we are out of questions, but I'll ask one last question with regards to the startups that I talked to. So a typical question is like, I have a time series data that is coming via my IoT in the field. Would Cosmos DB be a good fit for the time series analytics and say anomaly detection?
Yeah, so we've heard this question also. While we do have IoT use cases in Cosmos DB, for example, I can say Toyota in Japan has a lot of their car sensors now on Cosmos DB. Again, we do have folks from like Havel on Cosmos DB. So a lot of IoT related customers and their data inputs coming into Cosmos DB is there. They're using it in two ways. One is they're using it to run aggregation queries, or they're using it with Synapse Link for some further analytics. If you're looking for pure time series kind of data storage and data access and data massaging, Cosmos DB today is not a time series database. So that is not something we support today.
Okay, I think those are the questions that were there. Any last comments before we stop for the day?
Yeah, so just one last comment from my end, and for which I will share my screen to kind of show through certain resources and assets that is here. As I said, we have a one-stop shop, which is cosmos.com. You can also try free tier in Cosmos DB if there is an Azure account. If there is no Azure account, you can just try for free is also available. And then there are a bunch of labs and scenario-based labs and certain solution accelerators. So these will be certain pieces that I wanted to share. Last but not the least, my Twitter handle is SHARAN779. So if there is any need, or we tweet on Cosmos DB here, but if there's any need that you want to reach out, we'll be more than glad to do that. Of course, the wonderful startup team with Vinayak, rest of the folks who are here, and we are very much reachable. We are more like a startup within Microsoft ourselves. We pride ourselves to say that this is more like a startup within Microsoft. So right from building the product, evangelizing the product, selling the product, doing the customer support for the product, and then ensuring there is value and success, we'll try to be there as and when required. So that's my last handoff notes.
Cool. Thanks a lot. I think with that, we will end this webinar. You should also have a poll on your screen that to collect feedback about this session. So please fill in the questionnaire, and we will see you next time next month with another topic in the data landscape. We shall be announcing that soon. So yeah, so see you soon. Bye everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Aranya. Bye.